I did it. I cut 2 really big holes in the side of my camper.
Howdy, howdy. Thank you for coming back to my channel and watching my video series on building an expedition camper. We're on video number 45. And in the last video, number 44 and 43, we built out those gear garages by cutting them out. And now we got to go ahead and get those framed out in the bed platform, all built in as one. So let's dive into it.
It's actually been really hard. I've been struggling with it for a long time. I was worried about it. It ended up turning out okay. I am now stressing over simply these extrusions and what to do about them. You can see these 2 here that I've cut. They come together at a mitered corner. These aren't pushed right together yet. And that's been my approach, is to do these mitered corners like that. And I think that looks really good. And it's also in line with mostly what Total Composites did. They didn't do that here, but they did that here. And this one, granted, is going to be covered over by cap, but some of them have and some don't. And my thought was I'd do all miters all year round, but I'm really struggling with these front corners, and that these 2 here, where these 2 pieces, extrusions, come together, because this one here structurally ties in the bed platform, and this one here ties in not just the side with the sidewall and the bed wall, the front wall of the garage, rear wall of the camper cabin at the floor level. And so all those will be glued in. I'll make it super strong. It'll create this big kind of gusseted angle on the rear here, create that really strong, and of course frame in the garage as well and close that in. But I'm really struggling to make these corners, in particular because if I do a miter, everything's got to come together perfectly right. That means the height of the bed platform, because it's also set by the height of my departure angle here. It rests exactly on top of that. So I've got that to contend with, right? So I have that level fixed, which seems easy enough. But then I'm going to add some structural reinforcement inside of this extrusion and channel, some really thin structural reinforcement, so I can tie hinges into that. So I've got that additional thickness, the thickness of the extrusion itself, and then I got the bed platform at its fixed height. And then I also have the bed wall at its fixed position. It all seems like really easy, but they all got to come together absolutely perfect because they all support each other and got to get glued and tight together. And I've been stressing over all this because literally everything has to be pretty much cut in exactly the right place, 3-dimensionally, down to about 1 millimeter, maybe 2 millimeters off by the most. So hard to do when you're just hand cutting everything and hand measuring this. I don't have any CNC machine or anything like that to do this. So I am thinking too that it might be better to not do a miter up here, because if I'm off even by a couple mils, I'll have this gap there, and I think it's better to come together at 2 90s come together. A little bit of gap is not going to be as visible or as hard to cover up. And also I think it's going to actually be stronger. I can tie in the bed platform a little bit more strongly. I've got a little mock-up going on here that I've been playing with. I'm playing with different angles and stuff to try it out. So I think that's what I'm going to do. And just want to make sure it looks good. It's going to look all right. It's going to be weather tight, seal, all that stuff. But I think it's really my way to getting this done quicker, sooner, happier, and still being just as strong, if not stronger. So I'm just stressing over it. Got to move forward. So I got to move forward to get this done. I got to make the cuts one way or another. Got to make the cuts. So anyways, these little decisions can be stressful because I want to make sure it's right and it's good and it's as near perfect as it can be. And strong, but I think I got a plan worked out. I'm just going to move forward and make it happen. It's been a lot of work, but that one got cut perfectly and straight, beautiful, perfect. Practice makes perfect. Time to get to work. Let's get these glued in, this bed platform in.
And so it really starts with cutting down these extrusions. And again, these are extrusions that have a 2-inch and another 2-inch panel that come together at a 90-degree. I did go ahead and purchase these through Total Composites. They were available later after I had purchased the camper from them. And I thought these would be great for framing out the bed platform, where both the wall and the platform itself are in 2-inch extrusions or 2-inch thicknesses. And so I took these extrusions and I go ahead and cut them down, and here I'm actually notching out a section because there's some notches that have to go into the door framing to really frame that out, and all the miter corners of course have to come in to the gear garages. And it's actually pretty challenging because of course these extrusions are a pretty complicated profile. They're not just an angle, they're multiple angles and T's that all come together as one. And so they do have to be cut on multiple different tools and multiple different steps and ways. And of course, one of the things I did was I went ahead and applied some tape to them as well to just protect some of the edges, make sure they didn't get scratched up. What I have found is they're actually quite durable, very well built, and incredibly strong. But there's a lot of back and forth in the measuring and the tempting of the fits to test them out, make sure that they do fit pretty well before obviously getting to the final step, which is gluing them in. And once they're glued in, they are glued in. And so just checking all that out, and of course having to get them all so that they are level and at 90 degrees to each other to frame out these gear garage openings, and also of course the bed platform itself, which I do want to be at 90-degree angles or 0-degree angles to relative to the camper itself. One of the challenges in doing this is that I was working with regular bubble levels, and the camper itself is off by about 3 or 4 degrees because it sits up in the rear, as there is very little weight in the rear on it right now. And so later on I did go ahead and purchase a digital level meter and a small one, which worked incredibly well. But nonetheless, there was a lot of kind of thinking through and planning out to get everything straight and all these miter cuts come together, and also how this is all going to fit together when it all has glue on it, because essentially there's about 20 different extrusions of pieces that come together along with the bed platform wall that all get glued in together all as one single piece, and they all have to basically be interconnected and brought in together. In the same time, I'm also framing out inside and outside corners all together, so it is tricky to do all this and get it absolutely right. And I'm also adding some additional reinforcement inside these channels to help strengthen them for the gear garage hinges. Well, it's a good thing I double checked my measurement, because I thought it was 42 inches. It's 41 inches. It's a good thing I checked. All right. Let's see how she fits. Let's put it on like it's going to go. This. That. Okay, let's cut this out. Let's notch that. I don't need to cut that yet. But if I notch this, I can figure out this exact height here. Oh, that's looking good so far. All right, let's do that. Oh, it's gonna be a little tricky. Let's see, how am I gonna do this cut? Oh my gosh, how am I gonna do that cut? I don't know how I'm gonna do this cut. I'm gonna have to go in like that to there. Oh boy, that's tricky. If I get this one right to there. And the pieces I cut with the cutoff wheel do leave some burnt marks on the side, but those clean up really nicely with some rubbing alcohol, and a fine tooth blade definitely cuts much nicer. Let's go try this one out. Woohoo! Yeah! Yes, indeed. It's definitely good to check all your measurements. Check them once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. And particularly in this case too, because I have a limited amount of extrusions, and that they're all in set lengths, and of course I need certain lengths and then certain shorter pieces for the shorter sections, and they have to come in at different angles. Some are cut at a reverse 45 or a positive 45, and so I have to really think through all the cuts to make sure I'm using up all of my pieces but not running out of pieces. And then, of course, while making the cuts, getting all those in the right places, a little bit of line up and being very efficient with my cuts. As you can see here, cutting right down to the very corner, so I'm not wasting any when I cut away a corner from a 90 to a 45. And of course, as I'm making these cuts, also you can see I have a shop vac that's placed inside of the either extrusion channels themselves or into the saw there. You can still see a fair amount of dust coming from the saw as it's being cut. And you can also see I'm wearing hearing and eye protection as well as dust protection. All key things. The shop vac though definitely does help to remove some of that dust. I also had it, as I talked about in an earlier video, installed a whole garage or shop air filtration system, which I do have running, and that does remove a lot of the dust that does accumulate within the garage that may be kind of airborne, and so that helps to keep the garage space a little bit cleaner. But I also am very diligent about cleaning up after each cut, so I'm not just keep spreading dust around that's on me and on the floor and everything else. So there's a lot of little thoughts to this. You can see here I'm cutting these extrusions with actually a very fine tooth blade. And it works actually quite well for making these cuts, much better than the cutoff wheel I'd used before. And after getting these all cut and test fit essentially to the right pieces and lengths and in the right places, cleaning them all up to get all that dust and debris off and any burnt marks or so forth from the cuts, getting everything nice and clean with some rubbing alcohol, it's now time to go ahead and not only go ahead and test fit them, but test fit them with the bed wall and also the bed platform. And while test fitting them is not just fitting them for fitment, but also fitting them to make sure that we can understand how this is all going to go together once there's glue on these. Because once there's glue on all these extrusions and all the different platforms, we know there's going to be very difficult. And as we come across here, we find out that we actually, because the window frames from Motorcraft Adventure Development come in so far on the inside, they protrude about another couple inches inside of the 2-inch thick walls from Total Composites, that I actually can't lower the bed wall down into its place. And the way I planned to install it was to essentially tilt it down into place. And so I've got to figure out an alternative. So I'm working out that alternative here, and I'll talk about that in the next video upon the gluing up and how that's going to be done. So thank you for watching, and I certainly look forward to sharing with you the gluing up of the bed platform, the bed wall, and all the gear garage surrounds in my next video. So thank you for sharing, liking, and subscribing. So much more to come.